Tonight, we uncover a Roman torture so brutal, even the emperors tried to hide it.
Ancient Rome, a civilization built on discipline, law, and conquest. Its legacy gave the world roads, aqueducts, and the foundation of modern justice. Yet, behind the marble facade of the Forum and the Senate, there lurked a chilling darkness, a capacity for cruelty so profound that even Rome, the self-proclaimed bastion of civilization, felt compelled to look away. We often speak of the crucifixion, the ultimate Roman deterrent, but even the cross was, in its perverse way, a form of public spectacle and state efficiency. There was another method, one that bypassed the need for a spectacle, replacing the swift terror of the arena with an agonizing, drawn-out dissolution of the human spirit. It was a punishment so vile, so meticulously designed for maximum suffering, that it barely earned a name in the official Roman lexicon. Historians only whisper about it, often citing outside accounts from those who dared to document Rome's most forbidden secret. We are speaking of Scaphism, the punishment of the boat. Tonight, we descend into the shadows of Roman history to ask, what was this horrific, systematic process, and why did the masters of cruelty, the very emperors of Rome, ultimately ban the boat, deeming it too shocking, too inhumane, even for their own brutal standards? Chapter 1. The Legal Architecture of Roman Cruelty. To understand why the boat was banned, we must first understand the chilling framework of Roman law itself. Roman jurisprudence was a masterpiece of order, but it was also a masterpiece of hierarchy. Punishment was not simply about justice, it was a reflection of one's standing in the eyes of the empire. For a Roman citizen, a cives Romani, the law was protective. Capital punishment was often a quick, decisive blow. Decapitation by sword was considered a relatively honorable, swift end, preserving a final shred of dignity. The citizen, even in death, was afforded the respect of the Republic and later the Empire. But for the humiliores, the non-citizens, the slaves, the traitors, and the enemies of the state, the law offered no mercy. For them, the purpose of punishment was not dignity, it was deterrence. It was a public performance designed to instill absolute terror in the masses. The infamous crucifixion, where the condemned was left to a slow, public, humiliating death, was the prime example. It was torturous, but it was also efficient in its public message. But even within this spectrum of state-sanctioned cruelty, there existed a philosophical line, a threshold of pain and desecration that even the Roman legal mind hesitated to cross. This threshold was defined by the concept of excessive suffering and the complete annihilation of the body's integrity. Rome practiced many gruesome methods, the ponaculae, where a patricide was sewn into a sack with a dog, a monkey, a snake, and a rooster, and thrown into the river; the damnatio ad bestias, the spectacle of being torn apart by wild animals in the arena. Each was savage, but Scaphism, the boat, transcended mere savagery. It was a calculated process of biological decay. We will now explore the accounts that survived the systematic erasure of this horror. Chapter 2. Scaphism, the torture of the boat. Scaphism, derived from the Greek word scaphe, meaning trough or boat, was primarily associated with the Persian Empire, but historical accounts, particularly those preserved by the Greek historian Plutarch and Ctesias, suggest it was a punishment known and feared throughout the ancient world, including the regions under Roman influence or direct control. The sheer horror of the method is what links it spiritually and philosophically to the most excessive acts committed within Rome's domain. The process began with the condemned individual being stripped naked and secured between two small, specially constructed wooden boats or hollowed-out tree trunks. The fit was exact: one boat placed on top, one underneath, leaving only the head, hands, and feet protruding from the confines. This meant the victim was utterly immobilized, trapped within a floating coffin. But the physical restriction was merely the beginning of the horror. Next came the feeding. The victim was forcibly fed copious amounts of milk and honey. This was not an act of mercy, but a critical step in the torture. The intense ingestion of sugar-rich dairy would quickly induce severe diarrhea. The sweet liquid, the honey, was also meticulously rubbed onto the victim's exposed areas: face, hands, and feet. The entire apparatus, the boats and the trapped individual, were then left to float upon a stagnant body of water, often a shallow pond or lake, under the searing, unforgiving heat of the sun. The honey-coated skin, combined with the festering environment of the stagnant water, served as a potent, irresistible beacon. It attracted swarms of insects, flies, wasps, and beetles, who would soon begin to feed on the exposed areas. The most significant infestation, however, occurred within the sealed confines of the boats. The victim's continuous and involuntary excretions, mixed with the remains of the milk and honey, would pool within the lower boat. This festering, warm, and dark environment became the ideal breeding ground for insects and their larvae. Maggots would begin to feast on the living flesh, starting with the digestive tract, moving outward to the organs, and eventually consuming the victim layer by layer. The agony was not a sharp, instantaneous pain, but a progressive, relentless decomposition. The victim often died not from a single trauma, but from septic shock, gangrene, and the sheer mental breakdown of being consumed alive day after agonizing day. The process, according to some records, could last for 17 days. 17 days of absolute conscious dissolution. The psychological toll of this forbidden act was arguably greater than the physical torment, a true test of the mind's ability to cope with degradation. Chapter 3. The Psychological and Physical Toll. The Scaphism method reveals a sophisticated understanding of human biology and psychology far beyond simple brute force. The torture's genius, or rather its profound evil, lay in its use of natural processes against the victim. It weaponized life itself. Consider the 5 major elements of the boat's torment: immobilization, sensory overload, disease, insect infestation, and psychological degradation. The total restriction of movement was an agony in itself. Every muscle strained, but the body could not resist the feeding swarm. The noise of the insects, the relentless heat, and the stench of decay would quickly lead to sensory overload. The victim was forced into a state of total, inescapable awareness of their own body's collapse. Furthermore, the continuous forced feeding, while seeming contradictory to a slow death, was essential. It ensured the victim remained alive and conscious for the longest possible duration, extending the window of unimaginable suffering. Every bowel movement, every wave of sickness was a deliberate step in their own destruction. This was a punishment that violated every human boundary, the boundary between life and death, the boundary between the self and the environment, and the boundary between consciousness and madness. It was, in effect, a living grave. It is this total, unholy violation of the human condition that drove the most powerful legal minds of Rome to contemplate its prohibition.
Chapter 4. The Imperial Prohibition. Why Rome Drew the Line. When Rome considered the banishment of Scaphism, it was not an act of sudden divine mercy. It was a calculated, philosophical decision rooted in the very concept of Romanitas, Roman identity. The Roman mindset dictated that punishment must serve a clear purpose: justice, retribution, and public deterrence. While the Romans were undoubtedly brutal, their cruelty was typically purposeful. Crucifixion provided a lengthy, public lesson. Fighting beasts served as a spectacular warning and entertainment. Scaphism, however, lacked 2 critical elements valued by Rome. Firstly, efficiency. The execution was too slow. It tied up judicial resources for weeks, serving no quick return on the investment of terror. Roman logistics preferred a fast, clean end to the humiliores, who no longer served the state. Secondly, and more importantly, the appearance of civilization. Rome prided itself on being distinct from the barbaric peoples it conquered. Scaphism was seen as a Persian or Eastern method, something utterly alien to the organized and rational cruelty of Roman law. By practicing such an excessively grotesque and drawn-out form of death, Rome risked undermining its own narrative as the superior, civilized world power. The improhibition, therefore, was not a concession to compassion, but a reinforcement of Rome's self-image. It was an admission that even for traitors and enemies, the sheer biological degradation of the boat was a step too far, a cruelty that stained the hands of the empire itself. The death was so complete, so messy, and so undignified that it served only as a testament to base savagery and not sophisticated justice. The empire chose to return to its own established, if still brutal, methods. The forbidden method faded into history, becoming a terrifying footnote, a ghost in the annals of Roman jurisprudence. The tale of the boat torture serves as a profound reminder. When we study the brutality of empires, we must not only look at the terror they inflicted, but also the lines they refused to cross. Rome may have been a master of organized cruelty, yet even its architects of law recognized a point of no return, a punishment so fundamentally degrading that it threatened to turn the lawmaker into the monster he sought to condemn. Scaphism remains a chilling symbol of total human helplessness, a nightmare scenario where life itself is weaponized against the victim. The true lessons of history are often found in the darkness we try to forget. If you wish to continue uncovering the secrets Rome sought to bury, ensure you are subscribed to Curivella. Like this video and share your thoughts in the comments below. Which forbidden historical secret should we examine next?